Really, smart is how successful a space, a building, a design is for its inhabitants and its community and city as a whole.
You're listening to Smart Thinking, a podcast from WSP. I'm Matthew Marson, taking you on a journey into smart buildings. In this episode, we're talking about how architecture and smart are becoming more intertwined. I'm joined in the Dubai studio today by Diba Salam, principal and founder of StudioDS, an international design practice based in London specialising in the field of architecture, interior design and master planning. Diba has extensive experience in the UK, Middle East and Southeast Asia, supporting the RIBA as a member of their international committee and actively works with the UK Green Building Council on their research labs and with the British Council on artistic and cultural engagement in the public realm. First question for you if we jump straight in. What is a smart building and why should we care?
Well, a smart building is a building that can respond to a wider context and a city's infrastructure. A smart building is responding to many things, but in order for it to be truly smart, it should be able to connect and plug into a platform which you can truly appreciate how a city is functioning. So for architects, what we really need to be thinking about, and it's not just the architects, it's the engineers, it's the whole collaborative team. But right from the onset, when you're doing the actual concept, the feasibility, you have to start designing these components in so that they're at least future-proofed. Maybe the technology is not here right now, but it will be in the future, and these buildings need to respond to sometimes a 50 to even 100-year plan. And, let's hope those buildings last that long. And they need to be future-proofed, that's the key thing. So a smart building is a building that is connected to its users. It responds to its users, it absorbs the information that how the users are using their spaces. And that's from an environmental, from a social aspect as well. The way in which buildings are responding at the moment, sometimes a whole team are designing a building and actually the users don't know how to use that building. So if we said, for example, if the city, hypothetically speaking, there's a smart infrastructure in place, that building can connect into that platform. And we should be able to optimize the sustainable credentials of that building and enhance them so that they're adaptive and effective over time, whether it's mixed mode ventilation systems, whether through a series of sensors for the lighting, whether it's through how, from a health and well-being perspective, how people are responding to their natural environment while they're working, where they're playing, how working environments are changing over time, whether you should go for more, hot desking rather than permanence.
And do you think that the technology will help make a space more legible?
Yes, I do think so. I think technology, if we look at our smartphones right now and how we're able to really enhance our way of life because of the smartphone, and if buildings are more suitable for their users and there is an education program and training program for people to actually understand how to use it, then yes, it will be. But it does require investment up front, but that investment for sure, there'll be a return on that investment.
And is that why we should care?
Absolutely. I mean, if we don't care, what we're basically saying is we're not caring about the environment. And as sad as corny as that sounds, we have to understand that the situation, and you can only look at London, how hot it got this year and how cold it was in the winter. Climate change is impacting the way in which we're living in our cities right now. Cities are taking up a huge amount of greenhouse gases and they only occupy something like 5% of the land, the Earth's land mass.
Wow.
So if we're looking at an urbanisation of our cities over the next 20, 30 years to almost, in some places in Asia, quadrupling, it's incredible, the statistics from the UN. If we don't consider those components, then you are throwing good money with the bad money because just from an investment point of view, it will not be adaptable for the future. It will not meet your future needs. But also in today's day and age where, let's face it, it's not easy taking on staff, you need to be competitive. So by saying you don't care about that, you're saying you don't care about where you live, who you're employing. It's far more complex. There's far more complex social issues there to take on board.
How do you see architecture and smart?
Well, smart and architecture, we always use this terminology as smart design. And there's this impression that smart is about technology. And the debate, the discussion is always dominated by that. Really, smart is how successful a space, a building, a design is for its inhabitants and its community and city as a whole. And in order to design that kind of success into the process, you have to use a series of tools. And technology has allowed us through, say, for example, virtual reality, to really engage and communicate the design to the people, all the stakeholders, whether it's, a school, or whether it's, the actual client who's paying for it. That's absolutely essential. And also, when you look at the technology side, of course, that's what's taking it into a different dimension now. That space needs to have that true function that it can create the space for, whether it's a series of events or whether it's just a contemplative space, that it can respond to the technology that's available at the time. Or the technology is not available, but it needs to be future-proof. Mm-hmm. So how are we making sure that our buildings are future-proof is essential in the debate right now.
So that's really interesting. Do you think that smart is the logical progression of an architect's drive for human centricity?
Yes, I do think so. I think we're living in a time where technology is moving at an incredible pace, and yet architecture and the process of construction is still kind of slow. It is complex thing building large objects occupying a large piece of space in a city. When you look at how the smartphone has created a really interesting user experience, it's given us more power to our own experience now. And there's no reason why that experience should not be extended to how we experience spaces, how we experience, coming into a building, how we experience approaching that building, how we experience, being in that building and understanding what to do in that building. And, so that's from a very personal touch now, where users feels more competent to be able to exercise his interest in what he wants to do, he or she wants to do. And I think architects have always been trying to create moments and experiences that are memorable and that have a lasting impression and inspire. And we need to get back to that point where we're designing for, our people, for the communities. And I think smart is an excellent tool to allow us to do so.
If someone wanted to create some smart architecture, what would your top tips be?
The way I start designing, I want to understand exactly what are the key criterias at the briefing stage, so that I can ensure that once I want to go into the more creative parts, I'm not compromising anything that will make it non-performing. If, say, for example, we start with regulation, what are the regulatory requirements for that particular locality? And regulation isn't just a series of, I have to read off a list of criteria. It could be actually future aspirations for that city. And it's essential that security is at the heart of, there's a lot of information that you can glean from smart buildings, and that should be confidential. And it's important that the people who are going to be occupying that space have that confidence that is put in place. It could also, and that leans on the aspirations then of whether it's developer, whether it's an institution, a government that's developing maybe schools.
They've got very different budgets.
Exactly. There'll be very different budgets. When you look at, say, the Edge in Amsterdam, when you look at Bloomberg in London, these are smart buildings and they're very responsive buildings. But, they've had a pretty amazing budget to work to. And it's great that we've got developers who are willing to invest in that. But if you're, say, for example, a school and you've got limited budgets, but you have great aspirations for ensuring that the building is future-proofed, then really you do need to make sure that whatever components you're putting in place have the ability to serve technology well enough. And I have to say, it's really important to understand that security aspect as well.
A big thank you to Diba Salam, principal and founder of StudioDS. Join us in our final episode when we summarise all the content that we've covered over the past 6 weeks and draw out those all-important conclusions. If something in this episode has piqued your interest, then have a chat with us. Email smart@wsp.com. You've been listening to Smart Thinking, a podcast from WSP. I'm Matthew Marson, and thanks for listening.